Hey everyone, this is FixReef, and today we have another Apex EB832 up for repair. This one came from one of my YouTube subscribers. The issue described to me is that they watched the video on the 12-volt power supply repair. They attempted to replace capacitors. Something else went wrong or was wrong with the unit, and it's no longer working. So when I attempt to plug in this EB832, there are no LEDs coming on, but you can probably hear relays inside clicking on and off. This indicates that the 12-volt power supply is actually working, but there are no lights. So let's open it up and find out what's going on inside this unit. Okay, so let's see. Right away, I'm not seeing any kind of issues. Both of these connectors are in place and securely connected. So we'll have to keep disassembling. All right, there is not much we're going to see on this side. However, I do want to plug it in to make sure that we have the 24-volt power supply and the 12-volt power supply LEDs working first. Okay, so the 24-volt power supply is definitely on. And it looks like the 12-volt power supply is on as well. So that's a good sign. Nothing very criminal yet. I don't see a whole lot. Very well done job of replacing the power supply. You can see that it's very, very clean. Very clean, very nice job. Whoever did this did a great job reconnecting the power supply. I'll have to check the value of those capacitors, but from the looks of it, numbers seem to match. That's good. Okay, yeah, I don't think we have to worry about 12 or 24-volt power supplies at this point. The big question is why there is no power. So let's talk a little bit about where the power is coming from. Now the power to the LEDs, both this LED, the main LED, the Neptune logo LED, and the individual outlet LEDs that are over on this connector, they're low voltage, they're like a couple of volts only. So they come from somewhere. And that somewhere, believe it or not, is going to be the 24-volt power supply. The 24-volt power supply, the 24 volts off of the power supply gets converted to 12 volts by the buck converter over here in this whole circuit over here that creates this 12 volts. And this 12 volts gets sent over to the Aquabus ports and then further reduced from 12 volts down to 5, 3.3, and so on to power minor components here. My concern right now, the biggest concern that I have, is that something's wrong with this controller. Because if this controller is fried, we have a problem. Because the smaller LED lights off of this, on this unit, are powered off of this controller directly. So if this controller is busted, this EB832 is busted as well. However, first I would like to know if there is a 12 volt output coming off of the Aquabus port, because if it does not, then hopefully the problem is somewhere higher than the controller, hopefully in the 12 volt circuit. So let's plug in our multimeter to this 12 volt Aquabus output and see what we get. Okay, so the voltmeter is all set to go. Let's plug it in and see what happens. Okay, there is nothing. You can see that it's 1.2 volts, which is a very, very, very low number. So we don't get any voltage out of the Aquabus. Now that we know that the Aquabus port is not providing any power, let's quickly check for the input and output out of this buck converter. So according to the schematics for this chip, pin 6 is where we're supposed to get the input voltage. And that's supposed to be about 24 volts. And that's 24 volts off of the power supply. Pin 2, however, is the output. And currently, pin 2 is not producing anything at all. Okay, so since um, the input, 24 volts coming in, is good, the output is nothing, likely this controller is dead. Something shorted this controller. So let's remove it and see if that fixes the problem. Okay, so we just examined this buck converter. On pin 6 over here, we saw 24 volts input working just fine. On pin 2 over here, the output is 0, so this buck converter is not producing the output that it's supposed to. It could be due to multiple issues. For example, a problem with this capacitor, or the diode shorted, or something with these resistors over here. But now I've already checked the condition of every single one of them. They seem to check out. So I'm going to put a bet that this converter is bad, and we're going to replace it first. Okay, let's add a little bit of flux. And let's see if it comes off. Nice and easy. Now that we have it all removed, we need to clean up this area. There is definitely some discoloration on the main board around the unit, so something happened here. This looks nice and clean. All right, let's get a replacement. All right, let's get back under the microscope and put it in. First, some fresh solder. I'll need to add some flux. And the new buck converter goes in. This looks pretty good. Let me make sure that this pin over here is actually connected properly. That's okay. All right, the new buck converter is in. Just need to finish cleaning it up. And look at this. as good as new. All right, well, the question is, did it actually fix anything? So let's plug it in. I immediately hear clicks. That's usually a very good sign. And let's find out if the voltages come up. So once again, pin 6. Now it's showing 21 volt. And pin is showing 14 volts. Okay, so now we have power coming out of the buck converter. While we have it plugged in, let's check the power at the aqua bus. And power at aqua bus is actually 19 volts. Well, 18 volts, I have seen 18 volts there. That's pretty high, but not unusual. However, the big question is, will the LEDs come up? Because I'm still not certain if the controller, the main controller, is working. I should have tested it actually while it was flipped, but I'm just going to go ahead and attach the face panel and see if any of the LEDs come up. All right, and let's see. All right, the Neptune logo is on. Let's wait a minute and see if any of this light up. Once it goes, since it's not connected to the main unit, it will not immediately turn any of the outlets on, but eventually it's supposed to fall back into default, and if in default any of the outlets supposed to stay on, they should light up here. And here is the default mode, and the LEDs are on. I think we fixed this. I'm going to assemble this and test properly connectivity to the main unit and the 12 volt output and the 24 volt outputs and all of the outlets, relays switching on and off. So I'll do all of this testing, but I think that this unit is likely fixed. At least that problem is now fixed. So let's briefly talk about what happened here. So the original owner replaced the 12 volt power supply. It likely came in with that problem. Potentially, I don't know. I hope that that was initial problem. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, I recommend upgrading the 12 volt power supply whenever there is a repair done to these units, because that's just a ticking bomb on your tank and it's going to fail on you sooner or later. So the original owner upgraded this 12 volt power supply. That made it work. But something happened, and the 24 volt to 12 volt conversion died. It's not clear to me as to why that happened. But that sometimes happens if you are not very careful handling this while it's turned on, and you accidentally short, some pins over here and blow out that controller. That happens all the time. So, for instance, if you have water damage on your Aquabus ports, more than likely you are going to fry the 12 volt buck converter and also the CAN transceiver, because they're all connected here and they fail pretty easily. So if you do your own repair with the 12 volt power supply, be very, very careful around this area and try not to short anything, especially when the unit is plugged in. Try not to touch much on this area, so as to not cause the short and the damage to the controller. But we are lucky this time that the main controller is actually working. And the fact that the LEDs didn't come on was not because the controller was bad, but only because the converter was bad. It's very possible it's actually doable to replace the converter. It's an entirely different story to replace the main controller. And with this repair is done. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate all of the subscribers. It is easy for you to subscribe, and it is important for me that you do subscribe, that you do communicate, that you send me interesting repairs like this. So thank you very much. I will see you next time.